On this program, we like to highlight candidates around the country that are promising, that we think are deserving of support, and that we think are doing important work. And we also like to highlight what's going on in states like West Virginia, where new models are being developed for taking the country back from the people and interests that have taken it from us. So with both of those thoughts in mind, I look forward to speaking with my next guest. Cathy Kunkel is an energy policy expert. She is also an advocate for sane energy policy issues, and she is a Democratic candidate for Congress in West Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. She is running. I believe she has a good chance of winning. I think she is running a very interesting campaign, and I look forward to speaking with her. So without any further ado, Cathy Kunkel, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here, and I apologize for the poor video quality, but glad to be joining.
Well, for those who are listening on the radio, they can't see the video quality, but it's very hazy, and I guess you're on a borrowed laptop. Are you in a coffee shop or something?
I am, but I think it's the laptop's fault about the video quality.
Yeah, I suppose it is, but are you shaking hands? Or are you like meeting constituents or something?
Well, I'm actually in between meetings here and just took a few moments to answer a whole bunch of emails, but we're going to be out this evening with some folks who have been opposing a factory that's slated to come into Jefferson County in eastern West Virginia. It's been a major controversy here for the last couple of years, and I'm looking forward to meeting with some of the folks who have been very active on this issue tonight.
Is this the Rockwool plant?
It is indeed Rockwool, yes.
Okay, well, we've covered that on this program, and I guess that's a good segue to something that intrigues me about you and your candidacy, Cathy Kunkel, which is, you're an expert in the economic and financial impact of natural gas drilling and pipelines and the effect those can have on local economies and communities. What made you decide to pivot to electoral politics?
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple of things, really. One is it's not so much of a pivot because I have been involved in electoral politics recently in the Charleston area in southern West Virginia, where I live. I've been involved in a grassroots organization that formed a couple of years ago to try to get some folks elected to the state legislature. And we endorsed candidates mainly around healthcare and education issues last year in 2018, and helped get a couple of folks elected who won by just a couple hundred votes apiece. So, and the organization that I was working with was trying to find someone who could run for this congressional seat, because we see an opening here, and ended up that I was the person that we decided to run. But it is obviously also my professional work is deeply connected to political issues in West Virginia, since the coal industry and now the natural gas industry have been very dominant political players in the state for a very long time.
They have been, and of course they have enormous financial resources that they're not shy about putting to use to maintain political control. It's in their self-interest, among other things, to do so. What's your vision for a congressional campaign, a winning campaign? You mentioned, and I guess that group is Rise Up West Virginia. I almost said Wise Up West Virginia, which is probably good too, but you've had some success on the local level. What's your vision of how a congressional campaign can win against this, I might call it a machine, that's got so much influence in your state of West Virginia?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think two things. First of all, I think that, our campaign is not taking any corporate money, which I think immediately sort of sets us apart from the typical machine campaign in West Virginia. And I think it's important to realize that a lot of voters and people in West Virginia have been sort of disenchanted with both political parties in the state, and feeling that neither political party really represents the interests of ordinary West Virginians, which is largely the case in many
Mm-hmm.
areas. And so, really prioritizing issues that kind of cut across party lines in West Virginia around healthcare and education, and bringing in federal investment so that we can really diversify our economy and support small businesses in diverse sectors that are not extractive industries, and really trying to move away from the extractive model in West Virginia. Those are kind of key to my campaign. And it's also, I think, worth noting that we have a candidate for governor who has sort of a similar analysis of the political situation in the state, and has been running a populist campaign and encouraging other candidates to run on a similar slate, and that's called West Virginia Can't Wait, which is, I think, a really interesting political movement in West Virginia right now.
And you're speaking of Stephen Smith, I assume,
Yes.
who has been on this program as well.
Great.
So we really, those of us here at the Zero Hour really believe that West Virginia has a chance, has the opportunity to become the model for changing a red state. And I think it's exactly what you described, Cathy Kunkel. And again, for listeners who may not be seeing the Chiron, it's Cathy, Cathy, Kunkel, Kunkel. It's kunkelforcongress.com is her website. I think that, you and the movement you're part of in West Virginia represent a chance, but I think it does, in many cases, require stepping away from the establishment of both parties to do that. So how does that complicate your strategy? Does it make your strategy simpler? I understand it as very much grassroots. Have you gotten any pushback? Is there someone running against, or you think they'll put up somebody from the establishment against you in the primary? How do you see all that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, we're not running a typical Democratic campaign, which in some ways complicates it, because we're, sort of doing something different that hasn't been done before. But at the same time, the traditional Democratic campaigns have essentially been losing at the federal level in almost all of the races for the last few cycles. So in that sense, it's definitely time to be trying something different. And in terms of primary, I was expecting that there would be a primary in this race, and there might be. The filing deadline is not until January, but at this point, I'm the only candidate running on the Democratic side, so we'll see.
So, Cathy Kunkel, how do you articulate, when you meet a voter for the first time, how do you articulate what you stand for? How do you say what you represent is different from the Republicans and Democrats they may have become used to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I say is that I'm not taking corporate money in this campaign, which I think is something that people appreciate no matter what their political views are. And it's true. Like, we need political representatives who are going to be listening to the people of West Virginia. And in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of examples, including our teacher strike, including this rock wool issue here in the Eastern Panhandle, where people have, almost unanimously stood up and demanded things, support for public education, opposition to charter schools, opposition to this factory. And then the political leadership of the state has gone and done exactly the opposite. So I think people are hungry for candidates who are going to actually be representing what the people of West Virginia are demanding.
So if you don't have a challenge in the primary and you become the nominee, who will you be running against?
Be running against Alex Mooney, who has been the congressman in this seat since 2014. He's a Republican, obviously.
And were you to attain the nomination, when somebody asks you, okay, how are you different from Mooney, what would your answer be?
Well, in almost all respects, but I mean, Mooney is someone who moved here explicitly to run for office for this seat in 2013. He is almost never here. Even people, I think, in his own party are frustrated by the lack of attention that he pays to West Virginia. And he's just he wins because he has the money to win, and that's the corporate money that I'm not taking, and I can't compete with him on that level, but I can compete with him on organized people power, and that's what we're trying to do here. So
It's exactly what I was just about to ask you about, was organized people power. How do you see that working? I mean, I think the only response to someone who shakes the money tree like your potential opponent is people out there talking to one another about why they should vote for somebody different. And how do you see that organization coming together in your district?
yeah, well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I'm running as part of this West Virginia Can't Wait movement, which is a great opportunity, I think, because, there's already people active in that. There are already county teams that have formed in most of the counties in my district of people who are organizing for their county around local issues and holding town halls with local candidates. And so, that base building work is already happening, and part of the goal of West Virginia Can't Wait is for those county teams to continue organizing after the election and continue holding politicians accountable, which is obviously key, regardless of who is elected, which hopefully is me and Stephen Smith, but regardless, we need more grassroots energy. And with our campaign, we're this fall traveling around the district, trying to meet with as many community leaders and hold as many events as possible to build a volunteer base for next year. Because like we were saying, it's going to be the door knocking and the face-to-face conversations that really make the difference here, and not the money.
Again, we're talking with Cathy Kunkel, candidate for the Democratic nomination for Congress in West Virginia's 2nd congressional district. So how do you see, I would imagine that the number one issue in your district is probably jobs. I'm sure there are other major issues too, healthcare and so on. But what do you tell people from what I've read and seen? The Rockwool plant would only create a couple hundred jobs. So, I mean, obviously they're going to try to pretend that's a jobs producing strategy. But what would you tell people when they say, how will you bring jobs to our district?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit artificial to put jobs as one category and healthcare and education as separate categories. For one thing, I mean, the healthcare is a huge employer in the state. In rural counties, the Board of Education is often the largest employer in the county. So these issues about compensating teachers fairly, compensating school employees, canceling student debt so that people actually have the resources to come back to rural communities and make a living there. Like, those are real bread and butter and job issues too. But I also think that we need major federal investment in West Virginia in, for example, rural broadband, environmental reclamation, in transportation and commuter rail in the eastern part of the state. That can all be bringing jobs and also improving the rural quality of life.
Okay, what is somebody drilling through the wall there or something?
Yeah, sorry, the coffee shop suddenly started, I guess, grinding coffee.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I will let you go in a minute, but before I do, just one last question. How are you enjoying being a politician for the first time in your life?
It's been a very interesting experience. We only launched the campaign a couple of weeks ago, but it's really, it's a fascinating district because it's two completely different population centers of West Virginia, one in the southern part of the state, one in the eastern part of the state that's more of a almost like a DC suburb, and then separated by like 14 rural counties. So just the diversity of the district is really fascinating, and been meeting a lot of really interesting people all over the district. So.
Well, that's great. Where can people go to learn? Oh, I mentioned Kunkel for Congress, Kunkel. Is that where they can go? .com? Is that where people can go to learn more about you and maybe contribute if they are so inclined?
Yes, that would be wonderful, and that would be a good place. People can also find us on social media, Twitter and Facebook at Kunkel for Congress, the number 4 in the middle there.
Okay, Kunkel for Congress. Okay, great. Well, Cathy Kunkel, thanks for all your great work, first in energy policy and now in organization and running for office. And good luck to you there in the 2nd Congressional District of West Virginia. And thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
You bet.